looked all over the forest. They spent all night looking for her, but they simply could not find her. Eventually, darkness came, and they had no choice but to leave. They couldn't find their daughter, so they had to leave the forest and return at first light. And they returned the day after that, and the day after that, but they could not find their daughter. And eventually they had to come to terms that maybe, or most certainly, the daughter was lost to them now. The forest had simply taken her. And tragically, she was now, more than likely, dead. And the parents had to simply get on with their life as best they could. Although being a parent myself, I know that would be impossible. Now, according to the legend, a whole 5 years later, the little girl walked out of the forest with not a scratch upon her. Her clothes were immaculate. And here is a really, really strange part. She hadn't aged a day. She was still 5 years old. It was as though the little girl had simply stepped through time and walked out 5 years in the future. A split second for her, 5 years for everybody else. And according to the little girl, when she was reunited with her mother and father, everything was normal. And to her, nothing was unusual. To her, it had been instantaneous. She'd stepped through some kind of portal in time and stepped straight out 5 years later, and nothing strange happened. But to her parents, she'd been missing 5 years, presumed dead, and all of a sudden, she was back. Now, I will say, just as I've said about some of the other strange occurrences that revolve in this forest, I found not one shred of proof that this story was real. Nothing whatsoever. It would seem that it is just another urban legend. And I'll be honest, there seems like a lot of that revolving around this forest. There doesn't seem to be a shred of evidence. Maybe the UFO is the exception. You've actually got some photographs, and there are a few videos on YouTube of like sightings, of apparition sightings. I'll put that in the show notes as well. Speaking again of sightings, here are a few more. Now, it is also said that many people venture into the forest to commit suicide, and there is an actual story of a man who ventured into the forest and did just that. It is also said that now this gentleman's ghost wanders around the forest, forever trapped there, and every now and again you will hear a deathly scream coming from somewhere in the forest, somewhere in the distance, and this is believed to be the scream of the gentleman who committed suicide. But once again, I couldn't find any evidence of this, but I'm not saying that didn't happen though. It's very possible that that did happen. There are stories of other forests in other regions of the earth. I think there's one in China where people do go to commit suicide, so that may be true. There have also been stories circulating of a tall, black, elongated man who walks the trails of the forest, and he's believed to look very similar to Slender Man. But I will say this, these stories were circulating long before Slender Man was ever even thought up. Before Slender Man was even a thing, before he was a movie, before he was an urban legend, before any of that, the stories of this tall, black, elongated man were circulating in Romania, long before Slender Man. And there you have it, the Hoia Baciu Forest. Now, there is one more thing I will leave you with before I end today's episode. Now, as I said at the beginning of the episode, Transylvania is probably most well known for Count Dracula, or the man he was famously based on, the real life man, Vlad the Impaler. Now, it is believed that the dismembered corpse of Vlad the Impaler is buried in different parts of the Hoia Baciu Forest, because it is believed that Vlad the Impaler was in fact executed in the Hoia Baciu Forest. He was beheaded and dismembered, and his remains are scattered all over the forest and buried in certain areas. And it is said that the ghost of Vlad the Impaler also resides amongst the trees of the Hoia Baciu Forest. Now, I must mention that none of these stories have actually been verified. I looked high and I looked low and I couldn't find any trace of any evidence of the story's validity. However, who is to say that these things never happened? Certainly not me. Maybe there are just local urban legends that have been handed down over the years, and maybe, just maybe, there is some truth in these urban legends, and this forest, as some say, truly is Romania's Bermuda Triangle. But I'm going to ask, what do you believe? Do you believe the Hoia Baciu Forest is haunted? Do you believe the Hoia Baciu Forest is a UFO hotspot? Do you believe the Hoia Baciu Forest is responsible for some very strange time slips? As always, I'm going to let you guys decide that. You take care of yourself and each other, and I'll see you on the next episode of Bizarre Podcast. Oh, and if you decide to go for a walk, probably best to stay clear of the forests, just for now.